Glad to know you stay with us. Global trade tensions continue to escalate, with businesses and investors closely watching for any signs of de-escalation. President Donald Trump has imposed a 25% tariff on Canadian and Mexican imports, sending shockwaves through North American market, while automakers received a temporary exemption after discussions with industry leaders. Broader tariff policies remain in flux. Meanwhile, China is taking a different stance, signaling that future negotiations must be on equal footing. Unlike Canada and Mexico, Beijing has responded with swift countermeasures, raising tariffs on key U.S. farm imports. With trade relations growing increasingly fragile, the stakes are high. Will diplomacy prevail, or are we entering a prolonged period of economic conflict? Well, these are the pressing questions shaping the global economy today, and joining me for more on this is Olaolu Boboye, lead economist and fixed income strategist at CardinalStone. Thank you so much for joining me.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
And also joining me, but this time from Cape Town, South Africa, is Professor Roux. That's Professor of Economics at the University of Stellenbosch Business School. Thank you so much, sir, for joining me today.
Good morning, good afternoon, and hello to your listeners.
Absolutely. It could be any of those. Thank you so much for joining me, Professor, and thank you for joining me, Mr. Boboye. Now, Mr. Boboye, let me begin with you. I'm not sure you have a degree in psychology, but I mean, pray tell, what's the motive behind Trump's action? I mean, before now, a lot of us were saying he probably just wants some form of negotiation and all of those things, but it's looking beyond that. Well, what do you think? I mean, talk to us.
Okay, so once again, good morning, and thank you for having me. I think that the action of Trump is way beyond trying to get people to negotiate or trying to have them come to the table so that they can have conversation. I think it's a combination of many things. First, I see it as a fight for dominance, right? I'll give you a bit of example. Look at globally about 5 years ago, US used to account for the largest trading partner for most countries across different continents, be it Africa, be it Europe, be it like 50% in Asia. But at the moment, China controls or currently accounts for more than 60 to 70% of the largest trading partners in most of these countries, right? So I feel like the first thing that Trump is trying to achieve in the US is fight for dominance. Secondly, is there have been a lot of conversation around the sustainability of the dollars remaining the dominant currency in the long term, right? I think that conversation is clearly or is more or less like it there in the other tone of Trump, even though it's not being expressed, right? He's worried that any major economic bloc like the BRICS or maybe any major economic power coming up and tackling the dominance of the US, right? I think that's one of the major reasons why we have Trump, setting these tariffs, coupled with other things that he has mentioned in terms of trying to boost local production, trying to boost local activity for the US economy. But I think that it's a combination of first dominance, then other factors can come in.
Right. Thank you so much. Professor, now I'd like us to bring us up to speed with the tariff conversations. I mean, I want you to tell us if negotiations have yielded any results. I mean, we've been hearing about certain exemptions and reprieve for about a month. That's for Mexico and Canada. But for China, I am not sure there has been any form of negotiation. Bring us up to speed.
I'm terribly sorry. I cannot follow the conversation. It's awfully distorted. I can't hear anything really. I'm going to guess what I'm going to talk about, if you can hear me. It's about tariffs, obviously, and trade wars. I think it's very sad that the world's two biggest economies are about to have engaged in a trade war, in a tariff war. It's the last thing the world economy needs in these difficult times. We have become accustomed to, for so many years, the idea of free trade. Now we're seeing just the opposite. It cannot be good for anybody anywhere on this planet. And I think one of the biggest concerns is that if America and China, for instance, would engage in a trade war, then Africa might be caught in the crossfire. Other questions that arise are, will China sort of take over America's role in terms of aid and the like to Africa? Will other countries take it over? We don't know. As I say, it's very sad that the world's two biggest economies are agreeing to disagree in such an awful way. It cannot be good for anybody. That's over and above any other specific arrangements whereby, in terms of AGOA and the like, African countries might also be punished in terms of higher tariffs. It's the last thing we can afford. It does, however, obviously raise the importance of the African Free Trade Continental Agreement. If we can get that going, in the true sense of the word, it might make up for some of the loss in export revenue to the USA. But that's a big if, lots of politics involved, lots of ifs and buts involved. As I say, I'm not quite sure what the question was, I can't hear that, but I hope I've given you some kind of meaningful response in general terms.
Absolutely. I mean, okay. I mean, you give us your general comment on the conversation and how that, we need to also begin to look at after and how all of this might also affect Africa and the like. I was actually asking to know what the conversation is at the moment, because we know that negotiations are ongoing and some automakers in Canada and Mexico have gotten reprieve. And we also know that there is also a month reprieve in store for those. However, for China, we haven't really heard anything in terms of negotiations. But away from that, I want us to look at this Mr. Boboye. I mean, he justified his actions by citing key reasons. He talked about curbing immigration and drug trafficking and also balancing the trade deficit with Mexico and Canada. How effective do you think tariffs are in addressing these issues? I mean, because notably, Canada's Prime Minister has actually dismissed claims linking Canada to the fentanyl crisis, and U.S. data suggests only 1% of seized fentanyl actually comes from Canada. So let me get your thoughts on that. Is he really going to be able to address these issues with the tariffs that he has imposed?
Okay, so thanks. There's need to provide a bit of context here. Let's go back to memory lane a bit. In the first coming of Trump, one of the things that happened was when he placed China on higher tariffs, what the Chinese companies did, and one of the things they did to be able to reduce the impact of those tariffs was to go into countries like Mexico, to set up activities there. That from there they were able to import or export to the US markets. That technically or effectively reduced the magnitude of the impact of the tariffs. Right. That's why when you check the numbers or you check historical numbers, you see that while imports or directly from China to the US markets has declined compared to total imports, right? From other countries that's risen in the last few years. But coming to your question specifically, when we are seeing new tariffs or tariffs on both Mexico and Canada, and the reasons why, or the reasons that Trump gave, if it's reasonable enough, or if it's going to be effective. Why? Some of these reasons might be valid, given the fact that Mexico has, the proximity to US, and there's a lot of drug concerns and the like. But I think that is not necessarily the most effective way to curb the issues. Take, for example, the Mexican leader already having conversations with the US, already implementing policies to ensure that there is reduction in the magnitude of illegal migrants who find their way into the US markets, right? Which means that there's commitment from their front. And this perhaps would have more positive impact in terms of reducing these illegal migrants, drug trafficking and the likes, than just increasing tariffs. Because when you look at the ripple effect of tariffs, from goods to slower trade to inflationary rates, it becomes worrisome in the effectiveness. So I think that, yes, tariff is not, there's need to address these trading balances, curb illegal migration, drug trafficking, but tariff is not the way, it's not the answer to the entire question. There's need for dialogue, there's need to come to the table, and I like the fact that Mexico and Canada are responsive, they're willing to have conversations, right, compared to China, right? So,
well, let me come in there. I mean, China has been in the picture before now. Maybe they know better how to deal with Trump. Maybe that's what's playing out, don't you think?
Sorry, can you say again, please?
All right, I was saying, well, China has been in the picture before now during his first tenure, so they're probably used to him and know how better to play the cards with him. Don't you think so? Maybe that's why they are not negotiating.
Yeah, very possible, right? China has been able to withstand the first coming of Trump. I don't think that this second coming for them will be a shock, even though things were different compared to the last time. The last time, China was growing at around 6% to 7% on an average annually. Currently, China is growing at around 4 to 5%, right? That's about 2% shift of what growth used to be. But China has been able to establish very strong dominance compared to what it used to be historically. So I feel like the Chinese are even well positioned to withstand some of these tariffs, right, compared to Mexico and Canada, which is clearly new for them.
Right. Professor, let's have your take here. I mean, boxing out China to... Professor, if you can hear me? All right, I guess he's no longer on the call. I hope he will join us again so we can continue the conversation. But Mr. Boboye, boxing out China to sort of bolster U.S. economic security and economic self-sufficiency sort of appears to be the main priority of U.S. international trade and tariff policies. I don't know what you think about that. But if that is the case, whether or not it's the case anyway, how do you see all of this playing out? To whose benefit will it be? How is it really going to benefit the U.S.?
So, it's always good when we want to examine these benefits by looking at the reasons why these guys are fighting, by looking at the first coming of Trump, and to be able to examine the effectiveness of the policies that were put in place. Like I said, the Chinas are in a better position to even withstand any tariff implemented by the US compared to the first coming, because they gain more dominance in terms of trade globally. They've built more capacity globally compared to the last time that Trump was in power, right? The US is trying to, want to achieve self-sufficiency, try to boost local production. But the ripple effect of these tariffs is where the concern should be coming from, be it from inflationary impact, be it from slower growth. For example, in the last few weeks, there have been concerns around growth. We even saw the market shifting away from inflationary concern, and the focus appears to be shifting now more to growth concerns. Some people are already giving the prognosis out there that are we likely to have a recession, because if you look at the last time that Trump was in power, there was a material slowdown in growth, especially in 2018 and 2019 when trade war was at the height of it, right? We think that a similar thing will happen again, which might lead to drag in the US growth, drag in European growth, because there's no tariff for Europe. Maybe China shaving off some percentages of the growth. So clearly, major economic blocks, major economic continents have been affected. You expect to see a drag on the overall economic activity. So it's tough, right? And it appears that the next few months is going to be more tough globally for everybody.
All right, we're still looking at this. What role can the WTO play in all of this? I mean, seeing that China has already filed a revised request for consultations at the World Trade Organization over, what's happening, the additional 10% tariffs that Trump has imposed.
So the role of, World Trade Organization here is going to come, Andy, depending on how the fighting partners are willing to negotiate, how they are willing to converse, and how they are willing to talk. So take, for example, the question is US and Trump, are they willing to talk? Are they willing to have conversations? Are they willing to back down on these tariffs? Because see, the mind of Trump, the mindset that Trump has was not formed or shaped a year ago, 2 years ago. If you go back to historical levels, maybe in the 90s, late 90s, and you hear Trump's ideology about the economy, it's been very clear that, Americans need to do more to be first in everything. American first before we other guys. Feels like, there's a lot of imports, which is stripping the domestic economy, right? It feels like dominance is being taken away. China is taking over. We need to do more. These views are not changing anytime soon, right? And Trump's believes that, he has a superior view. So take, for example, what happened to the conversation with the Ukrainian leader just last week. It shows that Trump wants to be in the position of strength. So the key question is he going to be willing to come to the table to have conversations? That will be what will influence the impact of any trade body, to influence things, right? But from learnings from his first it shows that he's not entirely open to conversations, except he's convinced by his guys in-house, which for now, they appear to not be in line with the thinking of Trump. right? So I feel like they will need to do a lot of negotiations. They will need to do a lot of convincing, especially in the US, right? Convincing and perhaps suggesting a better approach to solving this trade, the ripple effect on trade.
Right. Now that you're talking about the ripple effect, talk to us about market implications of these tariffs. I mean, are we already seeing downside risks for equities, bonds, and maybe industrial commodities?
Yes, exactly. And I would love to speak more on commodities, right? Because we are in Nigeria, we are African guys. It has a lot of implications for Nigeria. So take, for example, what is in the mind of Trump is he wants to bring down crude prices materially from the levels that we have. Currently, crude price is hovering around $70 per barrel. Trump wants to bring it down to around $60 per barrel. The question is, at $60 per barrel, what is the implication for Nigeria's currency? If crude price should come to $60 per barrel, the worst case scenario, and we see domestic oil production for Nigeria improve to about maybe 1.8, 1.9 million barrels per day, what you will see is that oil exports will decline by over $10 billion. Right? Currently, the external reserve, the current account is around $38 billion. If you shave off a gain or a net benefit that should come from the current account surplus, if you shave it off because of the trade reduction, then it gives an indication that current account surplus might be entirely wiped out, which might spoke a bit of currency fears. And that was what happened on Friday. And on Thursday, we'll begin to see a lot of dollar demands for local investors in Nigeria. And we saw a lot of pressure on FX. FX moved materially, and the CBN had to come into the market to intervene twice. The CBN sold over $130 billion on Friday alone, just to bring calmness to the market. And yet, the decline in crude prices have not yet happened. It's just the initial knee-jerk reaction that we're seeing. When we begin to see those crude prices getting lower, they'll begin to see impacts on oil-producing nations like Nigeria, like Angola, right? But what would be the benefit for us is we now have major refineries, like Dangote refinery. There are other modular refineries. Government is trying to reawaken its refineries. The input cost into those refineries becomes cheaper, right? Which helps to reduce, which can have a bit of positive pass-through to local PMS prices, assuming that there's no sharp movement in FX. Right, so that's that on commodities. If you go into the stock market has been in red in the US market for a while, right? All because there is uncertainties about those the policy. People are not clear on what is going to happen next, and we're seeing a lot of sell-offs in the US market. If you check the S&P, it's been down for a while. Now, when you go into the fixed income market, the US bond players at the moment, they are directing, because they are not sure of what is the end goal of this policy. In fact, the concerns at the coming of Trump in January used to be inflationary worries. What we now have now is more of growth concerns, that we're going to see a major reduction, material moderation in growth, that we're going to see some players going into a recession, right? That question is popping up here and there. And fixed income players are becoming worried on what could be the impact for their portfolios. So everywhere is trading, guys are trading cautiously. The equity market has likely been in red, right, in the last few days. So that's some of the impacts that we're seeing for now, which will most likely continue until we begin to see calmness and clarity in the markets.
All right, well, you're saying some of the things I hear you say is we'll get to know and all of those, but what do you think specifically about the impact of some of those things? Let's close on that in less than 30 minutes.
Please, can you repeat your question again?
What I was saying, in your own opinion, I mean, from your own perspective, what do you think? How do you think all of this will pan out, especially looking at inflation? How is it going to affect, maybe the monetary policy of the US in 30 seconds?
So first, I don't think that the global economy will go into recession, but I expect a material slowdown. The global economy's growth has been moving around 2%, around 3.2% in the last 3 years. I think that global growth will most likely come down to around 2%, around 2% to 2.5% this year.
All right, I'm afraid, Mr. Boboye, we have to go now. My director tells me I need to go. Thank you so much for your time and thoughts on the show today.
Thank you for having me.